Okay, I think we're live. Let's see.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone. I'm assuming it's going to mainly be the replay people in the very beginning of the video, right? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share this out to my group, the AstroHIVE.
I'll share this out to my group now. Let's see.
And for those of you who aren't in the AstroHIVE or in Calvin's group, be sure that you join us. We have awesome groups with very open-minded spiritual folks. Very great groups to be in if you're not already in them already. So I guess we'll just go ahead and welcome everyone in.
Welcome.
Hi, Michelle. Michelle's here. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle. I'm just making sure I'm sharing to all of my pages.
All right, Danny's here. Hey, Danny. Janae's here. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on a Friday night.
You know, right? Nobody's clubbing tonight? What?
They're at the spiritual club. Brianna is here. Amen. Hallelujah.
Did you say Rihanna?
Brianna.
Oh, Brianna. I was like, oh, Rihanna is here. Okay. Work. Well,
Brianna is a celebrity in her own right, too. She's actually the queen of memes and gifs. So she is very talented. Yeah.
I love it.
Very talented. Kenneth is here. Hey, Ken.
Oh, Ken. Hi, Ken.
And as you guys come in, please share. We would really appreciate it if you share this with all of your friends, family, followers, whoever you're connected with here on Facebook.
Enemies.
Yes. Oh yeah, them too. Because this would be a really good topic for them too. This would be a really good topic. All right. Oh, and Brianna pointed out that she is the originator of Jesus Levante. So, like I said, lots of talent in that one right there. She's a special gift.
I'm telling you, that was very special. When I heard that, I just knew that whoever created that was blessed by God.
Yeah, blessed by Jesus himself. Hey, Lisa, thank you so much for being here. So share. And while you guys are doing that, for those of you who may not be familiar with me, my name is Janelle, and I am an astrologer who helps purpose-driven women to connect with their calling as well as the career of their dreams. And I do so by doing my MOGUL magic sessions, which is a combination of life coaching and astrological chart readings. And this topic came up because oftentimes during these chart readings, I'm able to identify different spiritual gifts that my clients have. A lot of times they are very much aware of it, but they've been like, just shoving it down there, dismissing it, acting like it's not real. Or there's a lot of denial. But then we also have some folks who are also like, okay, I'm going to accept this because now you're telling me. I'm going to come out of denial about it, but what do I do next? So while I am great at identifying spiritual gifts, my wheelhouse is not as the teacher of how to develop these spiritual gifts. So that is why I invited my Aries brother, my friend, Calvin Witcher on here, who is a master prophet amongst other things. So I'll go ahead and let him do his introduction because you guys are very lucky. Okay, we have a superstar on this fine screen. So go ahead, Calvin. Take it away.
All right, let's do this. Oh my gosh, we're getting an echo. We blame the other Aries person. There we go. I love it. Well, thank you so much for having me here, my wonderful dear friend, Janelle. So happy to be here. And let me just tell you, your hair is on point tonight. I mean, it's just kissed by the gods.
There was a lot of sorcery happening before, we got on the scene,
I love it. You should totally start a hair care line called Sorcery,
Yes.
Magic for the mane. There you go. I won't I'm telling you, that was so good. Let me tell you, I need to stop talking on.
I'm writing it down. I'm writing
That was
that
so
down.
good. Magic for the main.
That was a word right there.
That was a word
Nobody
right there. I
else.
mean, well, it's already like digitally copyrighted because we said it here first, so it's
True.
kind of it's taken care of. It's done. So yeah, I would say it's so funny. It switches all the time with me. With what I do, it's so funny because I was on with Stephanie earlier. Those of you that know Stephanie Sinclair, and she says, you know what, Calvin's just a spiritual worker. He does so much stuff, and it's just so encompassing with so many things. But all in all, I am a prophet, which is somebody that pretty much gets communication from the other realm, also is able to communicate to other beings in other realms in a very simple term. And I'm also a psychic medium. I'm also a coach professionally and personally as far as life coaching goes. And then I'm a wine enthusiast. I love Oreo cookies. Yeah, and all things chocolate. So that's me in a nutshell. But a lot of on another note, I really help people to access who they're meant to be in this lifetime, get to the root of those issues, figure out how to make it work for them. And that's at the core of what I love to do. I tend to blend a lot of the sacred and the secular together. So I love religion, love spirituality. I tend to blend those together in a lot of what I do. So sometimes they can take a very traditional approach, and I'll pull up some texts from other scriptures, and then sometimes I'll go very esoteric and occultic, and I'll go back and forth. But that's me in a nutshell. And thank you everyone that's watching. Thank you everyone that shared. I don't see if anybody has shared that, but I trust that they have. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Let's see, we have a good amount of people right now. All right, it's gonna be fun.
Hi, Kari. Thanks for being here. All righty. So
she says, chocolate. Yes.
Yeah, I'm a chocolate person too.
Maybe that's an Aries thing.
It could be.
I don't know. I don't know.
Could be. But all right, so the first question that comes up when I don't want to say confront, but when I confirm people about or confirm spiritual gifts to people, if they're open to it, it's like, okay, what do I do now? What do I do with this? First thing I always tell people is, listen, like, just because you have these spiritual gifts doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go and scream out to the world that you're a psychic or a medium. It's not like you have to go make that your profession. This can just totally be like your secret superpower that you have, unless it is part of your calling to go ahead and, make this part of your career. So, and for the most part, it doesn't feel like, or I can at least say with my clients so far, a lot of them aren't looking to make it a career, but they do want to develop these skills so that they can use it in their everyday life, in their business, especially in their relationships. What is step one when you finally come out of denial about the spiritual gifts that you have?
What is step one when you first come out of denial with the spiritual gifts that you have? The interesting thing with that, I think oftentimes that people, once they get out of denial, I think the first step is really starting to understand what their gift actually is. Because I have found, and this is probably the case with you, most people, when they have their gift, they know they have something special, right? And they keep it very generic. They have their superpower, like what you're saying. They have this yearning to be something more or to do something more. Let's just classify that as under spiritual gifts, right? Once they come out of that denial and they kind of start to own that, then I typically find where they start to go into search of what that actually is, what that means, because most people really, what I found is they just don't know. And so I have found that most of the time it's really starting to get a little more specific about what the gift is, how it shows up in your life. Honestly, how it's always shown up in your life. I talk about this a lot, that this is not some new superpower that showed up. It's a pattern that's always been in your life. The only thing you're learning now is that you're aware of what the pattern has always been. That's really the biggest difference with it. And then I will say, after they get through that step, probably the next step is to figure out, well, is this for personal use? Is it for professional use? What is the purpose of the gifting. And that's where I will say those two steps is where everyone tends to get hung up on, back and forth. I see Essence is talking. Hi, Essence. Kyrie is talking.
So Essence's comment is really funny because I feel like this is like how most people react when you're like, listen, like you have a gift, and they're just like, okay, what? So she says, yeah, it would be helpful if spirit can have an orientation for your gifts. Like, here are your gifts and how to use them. So I feel like, again, like that's why we're having this conversation, because it's a lot. Like once you actually accept it, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, so this is not a regular thing that everyone does. Like everyone can't do this. And we're getting in trouble with Stephanie.
Oh, wait a minute. Who's on? Stephanie?
We're in trouble with Stephanie. She says, now y'all know I go live Fridays at 6.
Okay, to be fair, this was already scheduled, although we love Stephanie.
Yeah.
Stephanie also said earlier she didn't know if she was fully going to go live because she was on for an hour and a half. But we love Stephanie either way. Stephanie, just tell everyone to wait for you because your adoring fans don't mind waiting.
Yeah, and Stephanie, I want to be on your live anyway, so just wait.
I know, and we can't be on both at the same time. Come on, we're trying to support the kingdom. We need a shared calendar. I keep saying this. We need a shared calendar. Yeah. Stephanie's going to get me anyway because I need to call her back. But yeah, so back to spiritual gifts. Here's my thing. Over the years, I've started switching some of my terminology with that. I have found that a lot of people, interesting enough, people fall in different categories when you say spiritual gifts. Mm-hmm. I know. I feel like I'm going to go really geeky, and I'm going to try to not go too geeky on this because I'm a word geek. I love words and what they mean. So interesting enough, the word gift or gifts in the Greek actually means charisma or charismata in the plural, which actually means an extraordinary or an endowment from the gods. And so pretty much it's kind of like what you said, it's a superpower. But it's something that is very charismatic. It's something that is known. It's something that is kind of obvious. So when you have a spiritual gift, I try to always tell people it's something that it's present with you. Most of the time, people won't recognize it for a lot of things. They're either ashamed of it, they're dealing with self-esteem issues, back or forth, because sometimes high self-esteem can drown out the gift, and sometimes low self-esteem can drown out the gift. So it can kind of work back and forth. But a lot of times when people hear the term gifting, they tend to go a lot of different areas with it. So I call it the, the ATE model, ATE. So people either are very apathetic, so they kind of don't care about spiritual gifts, or sometimes the A can go for more of they're appreciative. They appreciate the gifts. T, sometimes people get threatened. E, sometimes people get envious. And so it's an interesting thing that happens back and forth with people with their giftings. And so over the years, I've found that I've started switching that conversation a little bit because a lot of times when people hear spiritual gifts, they hear exclusivity, which is never really my conversation. In a sense, I'm saying that we're all exclusive because your gift is not my gift. You're extraordinary when it comes to astrology. You have a mind for it. And this is beyond education altogether. And then everybody else has a different gift. So in a sense, we're all extraordinary in our own particular right, which makes us all special, but it doesn't make us all the same. But sometimes when people hear the spiritual gifts, people go into this really interesting dynamic that they start saying, well, I have spiritual gifts too. Anybody can do that. And the reality is that's just not true. We want to believe that, and we want everyone to be special. But it's just...
Stephanie wants you to break down ATE again.
Oh, ATE, ATE. So people either get very apathetic or appreciative of gifts. They either feel threatened by the gifts or they get envious of somebody else's gift. That's typically how I see people showing up with their gifts or people responding to their gifts. So I started switching it around, and I went through one point where I said, I don't have a gift, I have a product. A gift is something you get for free. A product is something you pay for. And because I'm like, listen, I have paid my dues for this in time, blood, sweat, tears, losing friends, money, training, a whole lot of other things. So it's not a gift, it's a product. Nothing that came to me for free. Now I'm kind of starting to switch that over to this abilities. Like everyone has some ability. Your job in this life, I feel, is to discern what that is, to discover it, and to ultimately work in it. At every level, I think we all have giftings. Do I think we have all the same giftings? Absolutely not. That's like saying that I believe that everyone can be Beyonce. Mm-hmm. Maybe in the shower. Maybe after you had a few edibles.
I was about to say,
I mean, maybe after you had, one or two swigs of Jack Daniels. Maybe. Beyonce is in a class on her own. Now, is that to say that Beyonce is the only person that is a singer? No, not at all. Is she the best singer? No. And if Beyonce, if you're watching this, I love you, boo. I will be your personal prophet. I love you. But the reality is everyone has something. I think everyone's job is to figure out what that something is without trying to take other people's shine, without trying to say, well, since somebody else is doing it, I must do it too. Or God has created us all equal, which honestly is not true. I know people like to say that, but it's just not true. We're all distinct. We're all different. We're all made maybe in the same image, but not with the same intent. That is so good. We need to put that on Facebook right now.
Wow. Okay. Somebody make a meme of that.
We need to make a meme of that. I believe that all people are made in the image of God, but all made with different intents of the divine. And I think that's why we have a problem. We want everyone to be the same. We want everybody to operate the same. We want everybody to be psychic mediums, prophets, diviners, astrologers, singers. And that's just stupid. That's not the case. I think it's because of that reason. Here's the funny thing about that. Wanting everyone to have the same giftings is actually more damaging than allowing people to be special in their gifting. And here's why. Because if I start saying everybody has the ability to be psychic, to be prophet, to be a medium, to be clairvoyant, whatever the case is, then I raise the bar even higher. This is the problem because, one, we make an assumption that everybody wants these giftings and not everybody wants to be a singer. Not everybody wants to be a plumber. Not everybody cares about being a psychic. And that's just true. The second thing is what it starts saying is you have all of these abilities and look at your life. You are so unfulfilled. You are not tapping into your life. You could be clairvoyant and a prophet and a singer and a plumber, and you could be a real estate agent like Donald Trump, and you are living so beneath your means. Oh my God, what is your life for? That's actually a hell of a lot more damaging than allowing people to figure out what their gift is in their own unique way and then just do it. Anyway, I'll keep on going. I'm on a tangent. Let me go.
Well, Essence has a really great question, which I feel like we kind of sort of brought up for a second. She asked, how do you discern if the abilities are for you or if they are to share with everyone?
No, that's a really great conversation. I think I typically divide this up into several different categories. I would say whatever your particular function is in this lifetime, I believe that you have to put the presence of mind. I believe that you have the abilities that are really necessary to get that job done. I think when it goes into other people, that's why I typically say gifts. Whenever I say gifts, I'm never really talking about them being for you. I think gifts are for other people, which is why I teach it this way, because most people that have a gifting, their gift does not work for them because it's not for them. It's for service to other people, which is
I cannot read myself
right.
At all.
It's a huge distinction. Do I think there's some gifts that flow back and forth? Yes. And I think that's absolutely true. On my end, on the prophetic level, I tend to see that it works back and forth. So it's funny because my husband and I, Jeremy, were just having this conversation that sometimes when I'm doing readings, I'm talking to people, well, Spirit is talking to me, and sometimes it's about me. And then sometimes it's through me to the other person. And then sometimes it's to me about a whole lot of other things. So I'm sometimes doing like 3 or 4 readings simultaneously. And it can be frustrating and funny and fulfilling all at the same time. I tend to know when I'm doing more psychic stuff, it has nothing to do with me. It's all about the person. It's very much my soul communicating with their soul, transferring the communication through. When it's mediumship, it's sure as hell not about me. It's about the other being communicating to me towards somebody else. So it has nothing to do with me at all. When I'm channeling, it sure doesn't have anything to do with me. It has to do with mostly a geographical people. And so the thing about spiritual gifts, most people don't access their spiritual gifts because most people operate from a place of selfishness. And I know this is hard for many people to hear. most people won't ever operate in a place of power because they're too focused on their gift has to be for them, and it's not for them. It's not for you. It's for the people that you're meant to serve. Now, intuitively speaking, I do believe there's a part that gets built in us that gives us a level of nourishment, fulfilling abilities, if you will, that we can start to be in a really healthy place. But I think sometimes this just goes into self-development with us. And here's the challenge with that. I think working in your spiritual gifts actually is probably the hardest thing to do. Because if you work at a job, you get compensated. So there's an understanding that you're working here, we appreciate you, we pay you. It's really simple. And I know you guys are commenting back and forth. And so it's easy for you not to give into yourself because it's being reciprocated. Spiritual gifts are a little bit different because it literally requires you to pull yourself completely out of the scene and to be a conduit. If you want to say it's a spiritual gift, I'm all about that, because then I say I believe God or spirit, source, the all mind, whatever you want to call it. And I'll look at it this way. This is the best way to look at spiritual gifts. If you're going to really operate in your spiritual giftings, it's tantamount to spiritual slavery. And I know a lot of people don't talk about it that way, but it really is. You, at any particular given time, massa, the universal massa, is saying, do this, don't do this, say this, don't say that. Go here, don't go here. Move here, stay here. It's very much a process where you're being told what to do. And none of it's really for your benefit. What benefit do I get by helping somebody else's life change?
Yeah. I mean, but in terms of like making it a career, or just like using it in like for like, you know.
No, this is what I would say.
Like I would that, because I was like, okay, astrology is cool, but I'm like, I don't know if this is like just for me, if this was just a tool that God gave me to like better myself, or is this like a career thing? Like it really took like a few bricks over the head for me to be like, oh, like you're actually supposed to like present this to the public and make this part of your career. So, or does that just come with time or just connecting with your guys? Like, how do you really make that decision? Like,
oh, that's an easy conversation. That's an easy conversation. I will say, again, I know I come from a different school of thought. I'm actually from the school of thought that I should not have to charge for my spiritual gifting. I don't think I've ever said this publicly. I've said this in our membership or other private settings. I believe as a spiritual teacher, you should be recognized within a community. The community should take care of you. I'm a big believer of that. Other indigenous cultures get that. They take care of their shamans. They take care of their elders. This is without question. I think on a westernized standpoint, we don't understand the value of that position. So as a consequence, we force our spiritual leaders, we force our practitioners to turn it into a profession, which is different because we don't appreciate it. We don't acknowledge it. And here's the reason why I say I know we don't. If we believe that this is probably way too deep for a Friday night. I just realized this. But you know, I have no other way to go. If we honestly believed that there's this God, and she is powerful, and he is wonderful, and is omnipotent, omnipresent, everywhere, can do anything, and that particular being forced and funneled all of its power into one particular person, and that person was speaking to us about our life, we would respond differently. We actually wouldn't be concerned that somebody was charging. We wouldn't question that, because to give to this practitioner is to give to God. Here's why I know we don't believe that. It's just true. Everybody on here right now can totally prove me wrong. It's okay. And that's fine. But everybody knows I'm right. We actually don't believe that people are really being blessed, favored, endowed with these spiritual giftings by a divine creator. We don't. We believe that people are like singers. They're just really good at what they do, so we should pay them because they're a really good singer. We don't believe that there's actually universal power flowing through people, not at the weight of creating worlds. So as a consequence, spiritual practitioners are under fire because we have to step back and say, you don't appreciate it, therefore we will charge you. Because that's where the appreciation goes. I actually say, I don't think spiritual practitioners should have to charge. Do I think they should? Yes. Do I think they should? Yes. Because here's the challenge. On one end, we're being thrown around like, from master. I'm looking at Stephanie. Stephanie's funny. By our spiritual master, which is fine. And I will say the people that I have found to have really sincere spiritual power understand this. They may not talk about it, but they understand it. It's a weight. It's a calling. It's a purpose that you gladly take up.
You know when you're supposed to make it like your
absolutely. It's not something you do for monetary reasons. It's something you do because there's nothing else to do. Think about it this way. Think about it this way. If I set somebody down, and let's just say we're at the beginning of the universe, the beginning of the cosmos, and I said, Janelle, you have two choices. You could be a secretary on one end, and I'm going to create this company called a medical facility, and you can work there and answer phones. Or I am going to put myself in you. You're going to go to the earth as me, and you're going to have this creative ability, and I want you to talk to people on my behalf. Which one would you choose?
Second choice.
Funny
thing is, like, now that I'm thinking about it, right? So the first thing I did when I learned about astrology, and I feel like when I first got into it, like, I was confused about how to even really read the charts. And I remember having a conversation with Brianna, and she was like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And then I got into it, and then I was like, oh, this is amazing. I need to be helping other people. It's like instantly, it was like I need to be helping other people. But I just started helping my friends. And then I would, just talk about it because I became so obsessed with it. And I was seeing how much it was helping me, how much it was helping my friends. And then all of a sudden people on my feed were like, are you charging for this? Like, can we get some of this? And that is literally how this business started.
Right.
I didn't choose this. I didn't choose it. It chose me. So I totally get what it is absolutely a calling. It's not even like, should I? Of course, there were moments where logically my brain was like, should I do this or not? Because of what I'm going to bring up next. But absolutely, it's on my heart to do so. And one of the reasons why I was debating whether or not to do it was because when it comes to having psychic abilities or medium abilities or the different clairs, whatever, a lot of us, because we grew up in traditional religious households, we were made to feel like a lot of these things were bad. And I feel like that's why a lot of us just kind of downplayed what we could do, or we just let it lie dormant because it was like, am I going to hell if I can see spirits or if I dream things? You know what I mean? That is a lot of the apprehension. So how can we help people to move past, I'm going to hell because I know things before they happen, or because I see spirits, because I hear spirits, because I smell spirits?
I can answer that question really, really easily. Yeah. Here's the funny thing about that statement. One, and I grew, again, for a lot of people that don't know me, and thank you everyone. I see your comments back and forth. Yeah, love it. I grew up in a very traditional Christian background, Baptist on one side, Pentecostal on the other. I mean, worked myself up on a lot. I used to be a minister of music. I was a youth president. I was a deacon, youth deacon, minister. What else? Assistant minister, pastor, the whole 9 yards. Been there, done that. That whole side of things. Ordained minister. Blah, 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 blah. So I get this on a lot of different levels. Here's the funny thing. 99.9 people that say you're going to hell for your spiritual gifts have no power. They have no frame of reference to even be expressing that level of depth and knowledge with the eternal. And I call anybody out on the carpet with this because it absolutely is true. And here's the best thing. to shut people up that actually say that. It's to actually show them real power. That's it. So I actually don't argue with people when they say that they don't believe that I'm going to hell, etc., etc. And here's why. I actually like skeptics. It's so funny because I get this question quite a bit. I didn't started recognizing it until I started getting a lot of Facebook messages, but people are always asking me like, well, what do you do with skeptics and people that don't believe? I'm like, I love them. I actually do my best work when people don't believe me. They've never met a prophet. They don't believe psychics. They believe I'm going to hell. They believe I'm dealing with demons, etc. It's funny because people that also talk about demons have never, ever experienced a demon. Trust me, you will know when you've experienced a demon. You just haven't, because people talk way too casually about it. And but anyway, I digress. So one of the things I have found is really the best. Well, let me say it this way. Let me give some grace and compassion to people that talk like that. They are committed to what they believe to a place that they need to be right. And I can't fault that. I really understand that because I think we're all wanting to be significant. We want our belief system to be valued. We want what we have spent 20, 40, 50, 60, sometimes 70, 80 years for some of these people to be true. Can't fault that. And here's why I got into trouble with the church all the time and with the Bible, because I love the Bible. I would talk Bible all day long and then talk about magic and a lot of other stuff the next minute. I have a challenge with people that talk about information but won't initiate on it. So if you tell me that Moses parted the Red Sea, I go into question mode to say, well, if he did it, how do we do it? If Jesus said greater works shall you do because I go, I have to question that because I believe that. I really, really do. So then I start asking myself, what's greater? And this is how my mind works. It has always worked this way. What's greater than healing the sick, raising the dead, walking on water? What's greater than rising from the dead 3 days after you've been dead? This is funny for me. So I start saying to a lot of people that tell me about hell, I'm like, actually, I believe the Bible more than you believe the Bible because I actually believe that's true. I'm actually in search for this. And let me tell you why I believe this. And I just started reading people. And here's the funny thing. My sister said this, and I'll say it now publicly because she said it publicly. My sister, she's, 12 years older than me. I'm 36. So what's that, 48? Also has grown up in the church her whole life. She was on a reading with the Saki and I, and she said she had never experienced anything like the reading with the Saki and I in almost 50 years of being in church setting. I think that's a problem for anybody that says they go to church, they believe in a God that created the universe, that can do all things, but you've never experienced that level of power in your church. But then you come to me saying, I'm going to hell. We got a problem with that, Houston. So then I say, come and hang out with me for a day. Not to convert you, but to get you to understand. So here, let me go back to this because I'll start preaching for a moment. Here's why I feel that the hell conversation only has power when you show up with no power, to put it very simply. I'll say it again. Hell only has power when you show up powerless or not in your power. When you show up authentically, who you are as God's being, image, divine nature, however way you want to say that, that is without question every time. No, I have yet to find anyone that questions me when I'm in that space. No one. Not religious, not atheist. And I preach in churches, traditional churches, the whole 9 yards. I've yet to find one person that when I'm in that space that they come and say, I don't know what to believe with that.
Right.
Find me one. And listen, anybody watching right now, especially if you're a pastor, if you go to church, invite me to come to your church. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with any kind of test because I know me. So
one of the things that someone said to me was that I should be careful because the devil gives gifts too, which to me didn't.
Who is the devil? What does the devil do? Can we bring the devil into this conversation so the devil can speak for the devil's self? Anybody? I welcome any, and this is funny. People don't like when I talk like this, but it's a true story. I welcome anybody right now in any traditional capacity that talks like that to sit down with me at Starbucks or anywhere else and conjure up the devil in front of me and let the devil speak for himself. And I believe in the devil. I just believe that people that talk about the devil don't have any power. So it's stupid. All this is like talking about mythology to me. It's like saying, be careful because Zeus is going to strike you with lightning. I ain't never seen Zeus. Do I believe Zeus exists? If you ask me on a real level, yes. I just don't have experience with Zeus. So I always say that, again, this is probably the prophetic side of me. I'm like Elijah and the prophets of Baal. I'm like, listen, you call your gods, I'll call my gods, we'll have a conversation, and we'll see which God answers by fire. Because I have yet to find anyone in that space that can actually practice what they preach. And if somebody has, and listen, I say this all with due respect, there are some people I actually really appreciate in that space. Sean Boltz, very, very well-known prophet in the traditional Christian space. Powerful. Let's see. I love, what's his name? Stevenson, Dr. Matthew Stevenson's great guy. Kim Clement, Prophet Kim Clement was great. I can name some that were really, really awesome.
So, not Stephanie. Essence has a really funny comment. She says,
"What'd you say?
The devil has gifts, probably works at debt collection agencies." That is absolutely hilarious because, I mean, he doesn't have, or at least what I understand of the devil, I mean, don't we possess more power? Those who are, because I mean, we're all God, right? God is in all of us, so I don't know.
Here's the problem with the devil. And here's the problem with the conversation of the devil.
Right.
That many of us, let's just keep it, I'll try to keep it, PG-13. If we were very honest, most of us were taught things and honestly still believe things that we have never experienced. I'll just keep it that way, at that one right there. Most of us, if we're really honest, we have believed things, we practice things, and we have continued to do that without any experience. And this is my problem. I'm actually not concerned about people that talk about the devil, even though I will say have never experienced the devil. Now, let me also clarify this. This is for my traditional Christian people. My people that do the occult, I'm not talking about them because they know about the devil. Luciferianism, the occultic people, satanic people. I'm not talking about them. They know what they're doing. Now, everybody else, not so much. Here's my challenge with this. I think most people need to be concerned about the God that they talk about that they have not experienced versus the devil that they have never experienced either. That's my problem. Back and forth. Because here's the funny thing about the whole you can't even get around the conversation with the devil. I don't care how you slice this, and I'm a theologian. I'm an academic in a lot of different cases with the Bible. Every conversation around the devil still goes back to God failed. I don't care how you slice it, and I can slice it a lot of different ways. It still goes back to God messed up. God fucked this up. Because how do you make a creation that has the power to rebel against you? I call BS on that, period. It's true. And if we say a lot of cute things, well, the devil did it and God gave him permission to, and those are all things we say to try to make somebody look good when there is no defense for it. So either God is not all powerful, the way we've been taught, and God created a being that is more powerful than him, that can influence his creation better than him, because that's how people make it seem. The devil has more power than God that created you. Or God is sadistic and looking back and saying, well, you know what? The devil's just wreaking havoc and God works in mysterious ways and God's got a purpose for that. That's stupid too. Or I'll say it this way. I think God and the devil are both one and the same experience, and it's a different aspect, different variety of that same being. No different than sometimes we're good and sometimes we want to cuss people out at Walmart. Do I think that's evil? No. I don't think that's evil. I think that people are slow at Walmart. I think that there's crying babies at Walmart. People get frustrated. Do I think that's the devil? I guess, yeah. Their prices are the devil sometimes. Those long lines are the devil. Do I think that's evil? No.
Right.
And I think once you leave that environment, you change. Yeah. Anyway, let me stop.
Maurice said something similar. The devil is God's alter ego. So there.
That's all that is. Here's the funny thing here's what the devil is. The devil is the part of God that God still resists to assimilate with God. It's no different than the parts of us that we refuse to acknowledge because we're still working on ourselves. And I'm sorry, you can say ouch, you can say amen, but that's absolutely true. That's what the devil really is.
We all have a shadow side. A lot of us are being met with our shadow side this month, based on a lot of the energies that are going on and a lot of the planetary activity. But yeah, I mean.
Right. And here's the other thing with this, and I'm going to shut up about the devil. If I can go into your church, or anybody can go into your church, and the devil has more power in your church than your God, that actually has very little to do with the devil or the devil's practitioner. That has more to do with you and your power or lack thereof. So I tell people, like, listen, if you're that concerned about the devil, you should be more concerned about your power or the lack of it. Not with me, boo, because we're good over here. But that's, I mean, listen. Where's my shit?
My own shoe. Tonight. Y'all are getting some tonight.
So y'all get the other side of profit that I don't show all the time online, but yeah.
Yeah, we are going there tonight. So Brianna asked a really interesting question earlier. She was asking about do we work on all of our different modalities at the same time, or do we work on like one thing at a time? I feel like I know where you're going to go with this, but I'll let you explain.
I am always going to say start with the most predominant gift, start with the primary, and work from there. Start with what's needed. Right there. Sometimes people, I think we make this way more complicated than what it's worth. Like, especially, this is why I don't like the conversation that everybody has the same spiritual gifts. It's like telling somebody, everybody's a dreamer and can get dreams about somebody else's life. So tonight, I want everybody, when you go to bed tonight, I want you to envision dreaming about Janelle. And when you wake up, tell me what you get. Do you know how much pressure people would be under? People would be freaking out saying, oh my God, that's not my gift. I can't do that. That's just one aspect. And so I tell people, like, why do you think that you're a prophet or psychic or medium or channeler or clairvoyant or clairaudient or clairsentient or clairtangent or etc.? But that ain't your gifting. You will know when it's your gifting. There are some people that are dreamers. I know them. My husband's a dreamer, or seers. Let them be who they are and it will come naturally. Oh, you're a dreamer too? Oh, you're saying hi to Alicia. Hello.
Oh yeah, I was saying hi to Elisa and Ari, but yeah, I am a dreamer. Ever since I was a little kid.
Right, and so one of the things I like to tell people is that your sensing has a season, and you go through different seasons of your life, and depending on that season, the sense that you need at that particular time will grow stronger, or it will be most prominent. So I tell people, like, don't overthink this. You literally have always been doing this. You have always been doing it. You just haven't always been aware that you have been doing it. And I'm not saying people should charge for it. I'm not telling people not to charge for it. This is really not a conversation about the practitioner side of it at all. But I am a firm believer that you should pay for it. I mean, listen, you guys pay Time Warner Cable a lot of good money to feed your mind a lot of negative news. This is truth. You pay, I mean, you do. Most people pay $200 for a cable bill with not being able to access all the channels, getting mostly junk. It's mostly distraction. But yet you have a problem paying a prophet, a psychic, a medium $200 to get you out of debt, to make you have a better relationship, to put you into your calling, to give you confidence to shift your career. I could keep going on. And somehow $200 or $300 or $500 or $600 is too much. Boo, you paid that to Time Warner Cable last month. This ain't that serious. I say that because the sensing side of things, it will be prominent with you. Most people are already doing it. They really are. They're just trying to make it too complicated. They're trying to make it. Here's what it is. Everyone's trying to keep up with the spiritual Joneses, and they're trying to say, look. This is funny. This is how this 8. Like I told you about the 8 earlier, 8 ATE. We had this because we have 4 boys. and they all have different giftings. Like one is a builder, loves construction. The other one's going to be probably a little mini Calvin. He's a talker, teacher, a little passive aggressive. He's not an Aries though, interesting enough. The other one's going to be a chef, at least the way it looks like at this point. And then the other one is a musician, right? And so sometimes when the musician is playing, one of the other kids like, oh, I can play too. Watch me do this. And we have to always tell them, let Brian be the musician. He's always been musical. We've never forced it. We've never taught him. We've never trained him. We've never put him in a class. He's always picked it up. That's his gift. So what a lot of us do is because we're in such a strong need for significance, we end up saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. I can do this too. That's just not the case. Sit down, stop trying to be everybody else, find what your gift and your passion is. Here's the funny thing. I think most psychics should not be practicing. And I know people don't like me saying this. It's just sad. And I know, but whatever. I think most psychics should not be practicing. Most psychics are simply really good listeners. That's really what's happening. Most psychics have a very empathetic and sympathetic gift to listen to people and to offer advice, which I don't call psychic. I call intuitive counseling. And so what happens is because of their need to care for people, their need to see people live differently, we've not taught this in a healthy way. So we say everybody's fucking psychic. Not the case. You know, some people have a very strong need to, they feel sorry that people lose their loved ones and their aunts and their uncles and their grandmothers, and they lost their grandmother, and they just know, gosh, if I could just help somebody else connect with their loved one, oh my gosh. And so they get these impressions, and then they think that it's mediumship, and really it's their strong sense and desire to bring ease and comfort and healing to other people. So I tell people, if you can just settle in on that and realize what's showing up in your life, you don't have to perform. And I always say this to all, I've got a couple of practitioners here on right now because I saw their names. I always warn every person before they go into practice. This, I say it every time. I always say, be careful before you go into practice, because here's what happens when you go into practice and you make it public. You have to then perform.
Yes.
And people won't admit this. And people that are on the other side don't know what they're doing. But the first time you say, I'm a psychic, you have to go into performance mode, because people assume and people expect for you to give a word at the drop of a dime. And what happens with people can't go deep in their gifting anymore because they have to go linear, because they're always focused on performing. So most people's gift goes stale and dormant most of their existence until they actually stop, and they stop practicing and they get deeper and more rooted. And that's a challenge for most people, which is why I typically say, figure out what that is first, understand it, and then go from there. I'll give you listen, I'll put this under anybody that's here right now that's practicing. If you're a psychic, tell me 5 professional psychics right now. You don't have to tell me. Just think about it. Give me the names of 5 well-known or not so well-known psychics that you don't know personally. If you're a medium, give me 5 mediums. Give me their name and give me their specialty, because not every medium is created equally. If you're a prophet, give me 5 prophets. Give me their specialty. Most can't do that because they've not studied their craft, which is a challenge. This is truth, and people don't like to hear, but it's truth. You should know who's in your industry. And this is why I will say I love the religion side of things, because on the scriptural side of things, there's a scripture that says, know them that labor among you. You should know who's in your industry. You should know what they do well.
Essence.
Say what?
Essence is she's naming out her 5 people. One of them being the dude that was on Steve Harvey. I don't even know. Well, she did mention Tyler the Medium. She says, "Oh, I'm out of this conversation. That ain't my ministry." That's hilarious. She's so funny. Oh my gosh! But that is super funny. Actually, posted something like that the other day. It was something that Amir Studemeyer posted on his Instagram, and he was saying, before you like jump into something, make sure you study it. You know,
right? It's absolutely. And here's why I say it's important, because, and I'm going to talk about this with my workshop that's coming up here soon. I'm going to teach on this. The challenge is, what people don't understand is people take for granted that because I have a gift and because I was born with it, or because they were born with it, that they don't have to cultivate the gift. And that's the farthest thing from the truth. And here's why it's important, because even though spirit is all powerful, it's still channeled and funneled through your experience, which means if you have less experience, you actually have to work a lot harder for it, because there's greater translation that has to happen with the gift. There's greater interpretation that has to happen with the gift. It's no different than if I say Watashi no Namane wa Calvin, does anybody actually know what I just said? Watashi no Namane wa Calvin. Most people can't. If you speak Japanese, you understand that I just said, hello, my name is Calvin. Now, here's the problem. This is how the psychic actually works. Not how people teach it, not how people practice it, but this is how it actually works. It's like spirit speaking Japanese to you. And if you don't know Japanese, what's going to happen? Stephanie, I'm not even playing with you, girl, because I know you got this.
He's dropping the name. Stephanie, you don't count. Get out of here.
Stephanie don't even count. They don't even count. But it's like spirit speaking Japanese to you, and what you're having to do is to translate it. And here's the problem. Yeah. Most people's gift stops with their demographic. Most people can't practice outside of their demographic. If you're Black, you can't work with somebody that's not Black. If you're Southern, you can't work with someone that's not Southern. If you're American, you can't work with someone that's Japanese or German, etc. Your gift is very geographically focused. And when I'm working with people, I try to get them out of that, because most of what people are doing is not perception, it's profiling. That's really mostly what happens. It's no different if you say a young African-American woman in church with 2 children, we automatically assume, oh my God, dad is not there. He left her. She's got a job. She's probably on government assistance. We think deadbeat dad. We profile them. And so what happens is a lot of psychics or people with gifts actually go into more profiling than the perception of it. And they say, and here, I know it. I've seen it happen. It happens in church all the time. So a prophet or a psychic or somebody will get up in church or get up in a gallery reading and say, you know what? Spirit is telling me right now that you are not by yourself, and that the years that you have gone, unnoticed, and spirit has been there the entire time, and you're going to find somebody that's going to love you and appreciate you, and those years have not been for naught, and you're going to find love again. That's not psychic. It's profiling. It happens very easily. But what happens is people don't get trained in it, so they have to reach for the gifted. Right. Which is why I tell people, like, you need to get more experience, because the experience actually helps you. It's like the foreign language. If you study Japanese, then if somebody says Watashi no Namane wa Calvin, you don't have to think and hold it and try to figure out what it is and go back to spirit and say, oh, what are you saying, spirit? You say, oh, that's Japanese. Oh, spirit is telling me your name is Calvin. Completely different way of operating. And so I tell people, you need to get those experiences, because most people don't really know how their gifting works. Somebody mentioned Tyler Henry. Tyler Henry actually doesn't do psychic and mediumship readings. He does psychometry. Completely different. We label him as a psychic medium. I argue that he's not officially, in my category, a psychic medium. He does psychometry. Psychometry is no different than having this pen in your hand. If this pen belonged to your grandmother, I wish I had something else here. Oh, you know what? Hold on. I have my athame here. This is a magical tool that is used in ceremonial magic, etc. Anyway, it's a sword in a sense. Most people would say this sword is a masculine sword. If you gave this to somebody and they do psychometry, I can profile this all day and I can say this belongs to a male. Spirit may not be telling me that. So what Tyler Henry does is mostly psychometry. When he gets the object, he can already profile it. If he did this with Matt Lauer. I'm not saying he didn't read the man. I'm just telling you what happens. If Matt Lauer brought a knife that belonged to his dad, Tyler Henry says, I'm getting a dad that came through. Now, I'm not saying the dad didn't come through. I'm just saying it's easy to assert that the knife belonged to a male figure. I don't know many women that go around carrying pocket knives. Do you? I don't either. And so the challenge with a lot of that is, if you don't have the experiences of how the practice shows up, it becomes a lot harder for you to practice. Like, I know Stephanie is mentioning so many different people right now. If somebody mentioned a prophet right now, like Prophet Todd Hall. Prophet Todd Hall is the king of names. He is the king of names. I see him call people's names out like clockwork. Kim Clement was very much a geographical prophet. He spoke a lot about Israel. Just keep going. Some prophets are very auditory, some are visual. As you start to study people, you start to realize how the gift shows up, and then you can start to find your place in it. Without that experience, it becomes actually a lot harder to practice. Most people would have to profile in order to be powerful. Anyway, let me stop because I see Stephanie is over here. Stephani's my amen corner.
Not a medium. The funny thing is that about you guys bringing up Tyler is that Stephanie was actually the person who introduced me to psychometry and like broke down what that was for me. So it's funny that you guys brought that up. One of the other things I really wanted to ask you to break down to everyone was how spiritual gifts show up, because sometimes we're experiencing things and we have no idea that it's a thing. So another thing that I learned, so I think I mentioned this to you before about I've always had that ringing in my ear. And I always thought it meant someone was talking about me because that's like a thing that they say in Jamaica, like, oh, your ear is ringing, somebody's talking about you. But when I was watching one of Stephanie's lives a few months ago, like maybe last year sometime, she explained that the ringing is actually spirits trying to communicate. So for 30-something years of my life, when I've been experiencing this ringing, I was not able to, or I had no idea that it was part of my spiritual gift showing up. So had I not seen her live, I would just always think that something was wrong with my ear. So what are some ways or some possible ways that spiritual gifts can show up that we might be missing because we just don't know better? We don't know what we don't know.
Okay, good question. I want to answer Essence's question really quickly, just to close out the Tyler Henry thing real quick. So she's asking, so he just scribbles on paper. Tyler Henry does two things. One, he does psychometry, which is he can touch an object and he's reading the energy of that object because all things hold memory. So people know this when they do in what's the word? Fitness, health, things like that. Actually, like muscle memory, that our muscles hold memory. Objects hold memory too. So he does psychometry. The other thing, what he does is also psychography. Psychography is also auto writing. It's another esoteric, it's a form of divination, which is that he gets understanding through scribbling. Again, not psychic, not medium. It is a way of him channeling the information. He does psychography, no different than how people use tarot cards or runes or angel cards or pendulums, amulets. I can keep naming them. He's using a tool in order to access the information. I have yet to see him. Somebody show me a video. I have yet to see him to be able to access that information without a tool.
Yeah, they always, when you watch it, you'll notice they always bring something of the person that passed on. So that's what psychology is. Like,
and I would say the problem is when you have people that are not educated in this field, having conversations about this with people like me and Stephanie that actually know about this field, we debunk that because I'm like, well, I don't classify him as a psychic medium. It's great for the show, but I don't classify it as that. So back to the question that you asked, which is how do they notice it, right?
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing with it's really good. So I found that one of the easiest ways for people to notice it is actually to start paying more attention. This will sound super cliche, I know. But most of us actually don't pay attention when we're living life. We just really don't. We go on autopilot. We get up, we eat, we sleep, we go to work, we drive. And most of us, it's like going down the road, going down the highway, and we know our destination, but we don't quite remember what happened in the process. We don't notice the cars. We don't notice what was on the side of the road. And so I find that there are tools, there are techniques that can help strengthen that awareness. I love meditation. The other thing too, I think being around other people with those giftings, genuinely that have those giftings, also helps as well. Reducing clutter also helps. So I'm a big proponent of going on particular fasts, media fasts, conversational fasts, sometimes going away from social media, watching the news, a lot of different things like that. And really as a way of you understanding that you're constantly being programmed, you're constantly being bombarded, you're constantly being manipulated in a lot of different cases. Because here's the challenge. Most people can't experience what spirit is actually telling them or what their spiritual gifts are because there's way too much clutter. So spirit has to work overdrive to get the attention. Versus if people just really stop doing half of the stuff they're doing, their gift would just be a lot stronger. Now, are there things like what you mentioned with the ear ringing that show up? Yes. Here's my challenge where I try to get people not to be hang their gifting on that too much, because what ends up happening is people go into this form of psychosis. Sorry, using clinical terms. Almost
Stephanie says sometimes there might really be something wrong with your ear.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. Thank you. I'm glad she mentioned it because that's exactly where I was going to go. Sometimes people read too much into things, and quite honestly, here's how this works. Most people would, if they're flying a plane, if you tell, this is a great example. If I said, you know what, guys, I was on the plane and I went from Dallas to Los Angeles, and while the plane was going up in the air, I just felt spirit working with me, and my ears I felt like I was hollow, and they started hurting a little bit and ringing a little bit, and I just felt my ears pop, and I just felt the spirit was talking to me at that moment. Most people that have had the experience of actually flying a plane would say, boo, that's not spirit, that's called gravity and being in a plane. And I know this sounds so condescending on so many different levels, but I think most of what people are doing is they're reaching for meaning, and you will always find what you're reaching for. And so I always say, like, back it down. Back it down, because you might have an ear infection, boo. It may not actually be a spiritual gift. It could be a spirit. Because there are, like I was talking to you about this earlier, there are some spirits, when they enter the atmosphere, it can shift. That's not a spiritual gifting. That's the atmosphere shifting because of a spirit that's happening. If you get around the presence of another spiritual person that actually has some power, the energy of the atmosphere can shift. That actually has nothing to do with you at all. So I'm always very careful of not causing people to look for signs. Because I think most of the time the looking for the sign is more the problem, and then we have a lot of people that, because they've had a few experiences, they then assert, oh, I have a spiritual power. Spirit, I'm clairaudient. Spirit speaks to me through hearing. And I'm like, maybe not. Maybe you have an inner ear problem. And anybody that I've ever worked with, they know I tend to rule out all physical things first. Everything. How are you doing physically? When was the last time you ate? How much sleep did you get last night? And it's annoying to people, but I always say this: you want me to do this because here's what will happen. Everyone that's skeptic is thinking about that.
Right.
They're saying you don't have a gift. You're crazy. You weren't seeing things. You didn't get sleep last night. You watched a scary movie last night. Boom, 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 boom. So I actually try to tell people you need to be skeptical with your own self. Most people fear doing that because they fear being wrong. And I say, I'd rather you be wrong. I'd rather it be an inner ear issue than for you to believe. I think that's actually more damaging than anything else. I've just seen it over the years. Most of the times what I've seen is that somebody will have like this inner ear issue. Let's work with that. It's a really good example. And it stops. They got healed of it because they've been drinking cranberry juice or whatever the case is. And so now they believe the spirit has stopped speaking to them, that God has somehow forsaken them, that God doesn't love them now. And I'm like, boo, that's not the case. It ain't that deep. You had an ear infection and you got healed of it. Don't put that much weight and pressure on yourself or on God. And God and the devil had nothing to do with that.
Right.
Slow down. It's really, really not that deep. It's just not. Everybody getting quiet, like, ouch.
I know. I feel like there were a couple people like, so do I have a gift?
I like Brooke. Brooke said too. Where's Brooke's comment? The fasting, I love. Yeah, the idea of fasting is good. I do a lot of different fasts. I do physical fasts. I do media fasts. I do people fasts because people are people. Sometimes I just go in hibernation from a lot of different things. And this is really good because what it does, it gives you perspective and it gives you contrast. And I will say, this will also, I know Stephanie gets this. I don't think you can actually be a really good psychic, medium, or prophet if you're not a good intuitive. I just don't believe it. I don't think if you're doing, you can work with somebody else in a level of self-development and self-empowerment if you yourself are not in the stage of self-development.
Right.
And here's the problem with that. Because you've got to know what is you and what is spirit, because it's being filtered through you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know, I'm telling you, I love it. Whoever said to know thyself, or thy own self be true. Absolutely true. You've got to know yourself to be able to know what is flowing through you, what is for you, and what's for somebody else. So if you don't do that inner work with the fasting, meditation, knowing how you think, knowing how you process things, it literally can become almost impossible to do a really effective reading. It just really will. And I would say most people have problems with it. I say it all the time because people are reaching. They want it to be significant, and it goes down to self-development. Yep.
You brought up, you just triggered something for me just now. Could you break down the difference between an intuitive and a psychic? Because I know. I feel like I'm like breaking down the walls right now. But I mean, the word intuitive is such a buzzword right now. Like, on Facebook, it's, intuitive this, and, intuitive health coach, intuitive life coach, which I've used before, which we won't talk about that anymore.
I'm not going to say anything.
Intuitive, hairstylist, whatever the hell. So what is the difference between an intuitive and a psychic? Or is there a difference?
All right, here we go.
Okay,
I can answer really nicely. So one, and I tell people all the time, and again, I'm a word nut, I'm a word geek, that anytime a word is, I call it the law of first mention. It's a esoteric thing. That anytime a word or phrase is first mentioned, it always carries that same intent. It never shifts. It's an apple is a freaking apple. I don't care what country we go to. You may call it something different, but it's an apple. Period. A lot of times what we do is we try to say, oh, well, it's an apple in English, but it's an orange in Germany. It's an apple, people. It's an intuitive or it's a psychic. It is not both. It is not interchangeable. It's just not. And if we don't understand it, it really takes away from it. So back to the words. Intuition. Oh, you're gonna make me think today. This is good. I love it. Intuition comes from the word intuitive. I believe it's the Latin word. And it actually means to look at, to consider. It actually means to gaze. That's what it means. If you want to say something that is synonymous, intuitive awareness can be used in the same standpoint. Perception, sensing, those are all in the intuitive space. It literally means, from the original meaning, to look at. To be an intuitive is actually to look at oneself, to consider oneself, to do self-development. We all have intuition, or we should be intuitive beings. And people that are not intuitive, we tend to call arrogant, prideful, malicious, a lot of other things, because we say, you have not done the self-work. You don't see yourself. Intuitive, different from psychic, which comes from the Greek, which means psyche or psychikos, which actually means of the mind, of the soul. Not intuitive. Two different things. The term psychic actually means that you're working with someone's mind, working with someone's soul, which is not simply a looking at. And so what happens with a lot of people is, because they're intuitive and because they can see, because they can observe, they feel that they have the expertise to work with someone else's mind. Not the case. It's like somebody saying, I went on WebMD and I realized that the cause of all bacteria is this, and I think I could be a doctor now. No, boo. You got information about something else. Doesn't mean you should be a doctor. So the psychic realm, literally, therapists, clinicians, counselors, psychiatrists, psychics, prophets, all all of those practitioners, it's literally one of the same thing. The only difference between a therapist and a psychic is that where a therapist has natural information that they learned it from a book, a psychic is getting it from another realm outside of a natural origin. That's really the only difference. I don't know how many people I work with over the years that you said this the other day on a live stream, so I'll say it because it was public, that I can find in 20 minutes what your therapist can find in 20 years. Because what I am giving you didn't come from a book. It came from a different source. And here's the challenge why I say people need to be careful with psychic, because you're dealing with someone's mind and you're dealing with someone's soul or their personality, their persona per se. How do I say this? It's more than just giving people information. People are initiating things based upon the information that you're giving them. So if somebody went to a therapist and the therapist gave them wrong or misguided information, we would call it malpractice. Now, we don't talk about that in the psychic realm, but the reality is there are a lot of psychics that are out there that are really doing spiritual malpractice because they're able to see intuitively what is happening with somebody, or I will say most psychics or profiling them intuitively. They're saying, well, because I went through this with my spouse, you're having this with your spouse. I wouldn't take that if I was you, honey. You should just leave him. Not taking into account that may not be psychically what's happening with them. Right. And also they're going to make decisions based upon what you told them, which means that now you're not bearing the responsibility of that information. Completely different. Boom. Completely different. And so a lot of times what people do is I will say I blame the life coaching community, because this happened with the life coaching community too, where we started saying because you went through it, you are now the expert to help somebody else go through it. And I don't believe that. I think it's a small percentage that's helpful. Do I think that you should be telling people how to live their life based upon what you experience in your own life? No, because most of us haven't done a great job in our own life, much less trying to tell somebody else what to do. What ends up happening is we try to tell other people what to do because we didn't do it. And we say it's psychic, and it's really not. We're actually trying to right our own personal wrong through the life of somebody else. Now, people that don't like that message, send emails to noreply@calvinwitcher.com. But that's true. But here's how you know it's true. You know it's true because, and I welcome any psychic to put this to the test with their work. The strongest readings that you have are probably the strongest issues that you personally went through. If that is the case, it is not psychic. It is intuitively profiling. And most psychics have a challenge when they have not had a personal experience with it. They have challenges with getting the information. That's how I can tell the difference night and day. Is if you're doing a reading and you're having a problem accessing the information, it means you haven't had experience with it, therefore you are unable to talk about it. Biggest difference. Again, it is what it is.
Something the other day on one of your lives, and I loved it. You said just because you can identify a problem doesn't mean that you can fix the problem. So I think for those of us in any kind of coaching space, that's where the mastery comes in, and studying and having mentors and taking courses and reading books and all that really comes into play. Because I'll give an example about when my business coach had to snatch me back one time. So
snatch.
Kim McCarter, if you're on here, I don't know if she's
we love
here.
You, Kim. Kim is hustling. I'm telling you, Kim is working right now. She may not be.
So there was a service that I wanted to offer. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm really good at this because I know how to identify this and da-da-da-da-da-da. And she was like, okay, but have you mastered that? And I was like, oh. I really had to sit and think about it because I would be able to identify the problem for my client, but I don't have the mastery to fix it. So I had no business offering this particular service. So this is why we need to have mentors and we need to have friends. Let me tell y'all, there are times when I do things, like I said, my coach will snatch me up. Calvin, Stephanie. I can't do anything mediocre, subpar at all. I cannot. There's a whole gang that will come and get me. Mm-hmm. So this is why, with whatever it is that we're doing, we have to, surround ourselves by people in that space, and we have to have mentorship. We have to have guidance, because especially with being like a psychic or an astrologer or a medium, we are really affecting the way how people are going to move forward in their lives. If we are giving somebody the wrong information, we can completely mess with someone's future. Like, it's that serious. You can send someone on a completely different trajectory than where they're supposed to be by giving them the wrong information. So
right.
It's not play. You know what I mean?
I welcome anyone. I mean, listen, I don't mind anyone trying to prove me wrong. I ain't wrong, but I welcome it. Mm-hmm. Anybody that's psychic, prophetic, whatever, medium. Well, mediums don't count. It's a different category. But when is the last time you went into a nursing home and started giving psychic readings? True. Fair question. Mm-hmm. Here's why most people won't do that, or they haven't done that. Because most of us assume they're in a nursing home, they go die soon. What is there to say? Sounds cruel, but it's true. Most people don't do psychic readings outside of their community, their fan club, their friends, their people that know them. They just really don't. Most psychics that have no business acumen or experience are not doing psychic readings for professionals. It stops there. This is why I started to say, this is how you know whether it's psychic or whether I call it intuitively profiling people. Because if it just is focused on your particular demographic, I don't call it psychic. Mm-hmm. I just don't. If that works outside of your wheelhouse, outside of your industry, outside of your people, I give that credit. I've yet to find somebody that goes into and does psychic readings in the hospital where people are dying. Here's the other thing too, why I say people don't really take this seriously. Let me figure out how to word this.
He's trying to make it pretty, you guys.
I'm trying to make it pretty because I'm trying to not snatch wigs. Here's what the church does well. Synagogues, sanghas, ashrams, whatever the experience is. Mm-hmm. The traditional side does a great job at training people and helping people to understand what they're getting into, which is why I like to call it a ministry, because it's a lot more than you got a paycheck on Sunday. It is, you have to go to the hospital and visit people, that you're doing sick in the shut-in. That's what we used to call it. That you're doing the nursing home business, that you're inviting people over to your house, that you're getting up at 2:00 in the morning and talking people down from the ledge. And people call you at 3:00 in the morning because they're about to put a gun to their head, or they overdose and you got to rush to their house to make sure that you can get them to throw up so they don't die, and then rush them to the hospital. Or if you've had to go and take somebody as they're admitting their child to a mental facility, or you've been in the hospital with someone as they're taking their last breath and the family called you in there. Most psychics, let me put it general. Most people in the spiritual community have never had those experiences. Mm-hmm. They haven't. They haven't had somebody in their arms while they died. They have never had someone call them while their mom was dying. They have never been in a nursing home to talk to elderly people that are at the end of their life, that feel like they have no hope, that their family is not there. They haven't done that. What they are seeing is the glory of Hollywood medium, and they want to feel significant. And then they say, I'm a fucking psychic too. And that's what I have to challenge with, because I say, this is not a product. These are people we're dealing with. You're not counseling people that have kids with autism, or people that have issues with diabetes, and people are on dialysis in the hospital. People are not working with those types of people. They're preaching to the choir. And then the choir is saying, amen, sister, that was so on point. Oh my God, you was so reading me. I don't count that as power. Sorry, I just don't. I just don't. Now, somebody is welcome to call me on that. But I say this, if you can go into the hospital and do that type of work, and you can hold it, if you can do it in the streets with strangers, if it's a different weight to me. then.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I said I don't put mediumship in this because mediumship is too close to people. And so I find that most real mediums understand this because they're dealing with people's lives. But I will say this, this is a call to action on every intuitive, every psychic, every prophet, everybody that's practicing right now, is to say, how does this actually look for you outside of a Facebook Live, outside of your group, outside of any of your friends and family, outside of anybody that knows you? How does it actually look? Right? So I saw there was a question there. Anyway, I'm going to keep on moving. What was that question about? Mentors. How do you find said mentors and tutors? I like that. That's a really good question. So I typically say the mentor finds you, and you also find the mentor, back and forth. So that who's that? Demetra? Hopefully I said that correctly. Miss Wells. I think you find the mentor, and I think the mentor finds you as well. I think you just know it. I don't think it's based upon whether you like the mentor at all. Actually, I say most mentors, you want to throw them off of a 26-story building when you really get a real good mentor.
Because your mentor will tell you the truth, and they will snatch you up like mine do.
Boy, they will snatch you up quicker than anybody else.
Yeah.
And I would say, and you want that. You really do want that. Because they help prepare you for things that you don't know that you're unprepared for. And that's what I appreciate about a real mentor. A real mentor does not care about how you feel, does not care about your grandeur, does not care about if you have a platform, does not care about your ideas, not one bit. But here's the thing, if you're in a really good mentor, when you get thrown into the fire, you will be prepared.
Yeah.
Period. You will be prepared, hands down. So
absolutely.
Anyway.
And I feel like the more that you come into your most authentic self and like step out the spiritual closet or what have you, the more you just end up connecting with people who make sense, that you know what I mean, like people who are mentoring me. I can't even really remember how a lot of you came. It's like you guys just showed up one day and all of a sudden I can't do anything wrong. Like, you know what I mean? Right. And like, even talking about mentorship, like one of like my business coach, when she coaches me and then I'm going to go off, she literally says, okay, don't embarrass the family. Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, to really have really good mentors, because you are representing them as well. You know what I mean? Right. Especially in the online community, the spaces, like they're shrinking by the minute. So right. Are going to automatically know who you're connected to, who you're learning from and stuff like that. But yeah.
And I love Amy's comment. I think it was Amy. Yeah, Amy. And I love that, Amy. I just want to applaud you for that and I love the simplicity of this, because you don't have to go somewhere and say, you know what, I'm a prophet, I'm a psychic, I'm a medium. Let's just talk. Sometimes what people just need is conversation and connection. I mean, sometimes I would say it's so funny on the spiritual community. We are the most disconnected and disingenuous people on the planet. It drives me bananas. It is true. And it's just like, can we just go to the nursing home and just sit down and talk to people and just listen to them tell their stories about how they used to be a model when they were 20 years old and how they used to sleep with all the men? And can we just have that conversation? Does it need to be that deep? And that's why, excuse me, I say that sometimes I will say it's funny because while I love spiritual gifts, this is all I've done really my whole life. Sometimes it's just not that difficult. We just make it way too simple. Can we just go I don't go to Walmart. I try to stay out of Walmart, but can we just go to Target or I don't know.
People keep talking about the devil, and the devil is Walmart.
The devil is Walmart. I'm telling you.
There are 100 things open and three people are actually working.
Now, unless Walmart is going to give me an endorsement, and then the Walmart is God. We love Walmart then, but right now we got a different conversation with Walmart. But yeah, it's just really not that. Here's the funny thing. This is how I view most people look at their spiritual gift. Have you ever had an issue where you lost your keys and you spent an hour looking for it and they were in the last place you placed them, and they were just hanging up, or they were just in your pocket. Most of us have had that experience, or ladies have. Actually, I shouldn't say ladies, men too, because I've had earrings too, where you thought you misplaced the earring, and then you realized it was in your ear the whole time. That's how people treat spiritual gifts. It's like you spend an hour looking for something that's already on you. It ain't that difficult, boo. Just be present. Here's the interesting thing. Most people feel like, let me rephrase it. Most people use their spiritual gifts to mask who they are as a person. And you will never get outside of the blending of who you are as a person with your spiritual gift. They're actually one and the same. It just is. So I said all that to say that some of this conversation with spiritual gifts is really just a matter of sitting down, understanding it a little bit more. Kenneth is so funny. Kenneth says, "It's right in your hands." Absolutely. Now that's my mama. She will have it in her hands in a moment.
He does that, not me, y'all.
And my mom should be asleep, so I'm good to say that right now because she's not watching. Right. Most people really care less what anyone thinks of them anymore. Yeah. Absolutely, Amy. Here's the funny thing about the prophetic and psychic and mediumship. Most people don't care about us. Let's just be real. Most people do not care that you're psychic or prophet or medium. They care about the message that has meaning to them.
Right.
So if you go in this anyway thinking about me, you're going to be highly disappointed. Highly disappointed. Do I think you should get feedback? I call it feedback. Absolutely. Absolutely. Do I think that people should give you testimonials and say that you're great and that you're wonderful? Absolutely. People do this with Beyonce. Oh my God, Beyonce's so great. She's wonderful. I think people should do that. But a lot of times people go in it with a different motive, that their goal is to be seen versus to be significant. And that's all I'm saying is the difference between, I feel, a good psychic, good prophet, good medium is, are you doing it to be seen or are you doing it to be significant? Biggest difference.
It's another word right there.
I know, right? That's like mic drop. Boom.
I know. I'm over here rocking. I'm like trying to like hold on to the desk and like not move because you're doing a lot and I'm picking it up. Whew. Okay.
Does this make sense, everybody? Because I'm just going out there.
Let us know if you guys have any questions. Let us know.
Oh yeah, if you have any questions, I'm trying to see if there are any questions in here because you guys were. I think Stephanie. Did Stephanie go on her live? I'm gonna get her if she's on her live.
Stephanie was at Whole Foods when she was chastising us for going live.
When I tell you, Whole Foods has the best salad bar. Best salad bar.
They do. They really do. Oh my God. Yes. Being
any questions?
Yeah, let us know if you guys have, or well, I don't know if there's any more guys on, but let us know if you have any questions about your own spiritual gifts or spiritual gifts that you believe that you have. Please, please, please let us know. Okay, so Brianna, Queen of Memes and Gifts, and founder of Jesus Levante, wants to know, with the gift of clear sentience, how do you help others?
Okay, let me ask you this. Is that something? This is another thing I like to ask people. Is the clairsentience something that somebody told you that you had, or is that something that you recognize within yourself? And I like to make that distinction because sometimes what happens with people is they will take on the role that somebody else is giving them, but they may not feel that it's their gift. So,
all right, answer that for us, Brianna. Rosalind wanted to know, does everyone have spiritual gifts?
Okay. Said Frozen. I'm not sure. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and answer. Is it Brianna's?
Brianna wanted to know about the clear sentience.
Okay.
She said, I definitely recognize it. I really don't like for people to touch me.
Okay. So clairsentient is, I'll make sure that they're questions popping up here. So clairsentient is really just clear sensing, or sometimes people will say clear feeling. I tend to group my people that are empathic, highly sensitive people in the category of sentient.
Yeah,
back and forth. So
for sure.
Right, absolutely. Empathic people I put are very much clairsentient. She said she doesn't like people touching her. Where did she say that? Oh, yeah. I definitely recognize it. I really don't like for people to touch me. So yes. Now, here's what I would say. Sometimes it can be let me explain this. This is really funny. This is what I like about the gifts, because I tend to bridge things back and forth with how do you help people. I'll give you an example. We adopted our children, and this is, I think I've talked about this before, but I'll talk about it. And because of history with mom, and it's public knowledge, it is what it is. But they were, some of our kids, not all, but most of them, were born with issues where mom did meth, things like that, and so as a consequence, there are things they had to work themselves out through because of the prenatal exposure to the drugs. One of the things that meth does, a lot of other drugs would do this in utero, but primarily meth, it will actually cause a heightened sensory ability with people. And so what happens with a lot of kids that have been exposed prenatally, they have to work with sensory development with them because their senses are literally in overload. So things like certain textures with clothing, they can't wear certain things like cotton because it's too rough on them. They become extra sensory in that particular physical aspect. Unchecked, unknown, they could go through later and say, well, I'm just highly sensitive. Physically, I don't like people touching me, when in fact, it could be something that biologically, physically happened in the womb. Why am I mentioning that? Because I've worked with kids and other people outside of our kids that have had those dynamics that they've had to work through their life. Now, with them, it makes them very receptive about what they can do, where they can go. It makes them more mindful, more conscientious. It makes them more careful about things like one of our sons could not walk on sand for the longest period of time, barefooted, and could not walk on grass because it was too sensitive. It literally felt like walking on grass felt like paper cuts to him because his senses were extremely heightened. Now, I'll flip that. On the other end, as a parent, knowing that he's extra sensory, I'm then mindful. Okay, if we go outside, if we go to the beach, he needs to wear shoes. And it needs to be shoes that really fully encompasses his feet. Sandals are not necessarily going to work because the sandals are going to let things in there. It's going to feel the exact same way. So what it does, it creates this level of consideration on both ends. It brings a level of compassion on both ends. I said that long little story to bridge this into clairsentient. Clairsentient is really more about understanding. It's about compassion. It's about consideration. It's about when you're in a public space, how close you are to people, giving people personal space. It allows for us to pull back for a moment to say, how are other people affecting me? How am I affecting other people? So how do you help other people with that particular gifting? Most of that is consideration. I would say it's probably most of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you kind of perspective. And so it causes a lot of people to be sensitive where otherwise they would be very selfish or self-minded. So I would say your spiritual power, if nothing else, is really being able to think about how what you do affects other people, how what other people do, what they do affects you. Now, this is interesting. Would I say that's a spiritual gift? Yes. Do I think it's a social quality that I think that we all should have? Absolutely. And here's where the breakdown with spiritual gifts can really go left. I think we all should have a consideration of how we affect each other. I think hatred and death and murders and people cussing people out and people running red lights all comes from the lack of consideration, all of which is solved by people that are clairsentient because they're clear sensing back and forth. So, if nothing else, you are the voice of reason, the voice of our consciousness, collectively speaking, that helps us to understand, like, hey, we affect other people, and that what is very small to you is a big deal for other people. What you do so effortlessly, like walking on the grass, because it doesn't affect you, somebody else has to take a second thought to that. Can you be a little more sensitive to maybe what somebody else is going through, although it may not be your own thing? So I would say I like the spiritual gifts, and when I put it in that category, most people don't look at this and say, oh my God, I have this superpower and I'm clear thinking and clear sensing. It actually humbles you because you start to realize like, oh, okay. And I will give some credence to when people say we all have these giftings. For this reason, do I feel that all people should be that sensitive? Absolutely. Do I believe and are all people that sensitive? No. Which is why we need people that are clairsentient to make it happen.
So that
long answer, I know.
So that kind of goes into Rosalind's question, which was, does everyone have spiritual gifts?
I think everyone has abilities to be able to do the job, the calling, the purpose by which they want to do. I'm always very careful at that because when people say passions and purpose, I believe our passions and our purpose change. Mm-hmm. I believe I view passions and purpose like this. The house mom that felt that, and again, nothing wrong with house moms, nothing wrong with housewives, but the mom that said, I always knew I wanted to be a mom. That's always been my calling. But then her son, unfortunately, gets killed in a drunk driving accident by somebody else. Her mission, her purpose, her passion changes. She no longer has the desire to be a house mom. Her passion shifts to now education and empowerment, and sometimes reforming our laws, education people on drunk driving, and now she's doing a lot of work in that particular category because one particular incident changed her perspective. Right. So I try to tell people, don't get caught up and hung up in your calling and your purpose and your passion, because all of that is subject to change depending on where you are in your life. But people get, and we've taught this erroneously, they were like, you got to find your one calling. I'm like, listen, boo, that is so subject to change today. Don't get caught up in that. Find what is, I tend to say, your core calling or your theme. What is the theme of your life? So the house mom, maybe her theme is to care for people. Her caring for people shows up in the home. Her caring for people also shows up with her educating other families so they never experience what she went through. The theme remains the same, although how she operated in her theme has changed. So does everyone have spiritual gifts? Yes. How they express itself, subject to change and flow. Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Carrie wants to know, do the gifts come in waves? I'm starting to smell things. I'm not sure if it's just me. You can.
Some gifts come, and I talk about this in my course coming up here soon. Some gifts, okay, so like in psychology, we call it comorbidity. Comorbidity is something like if somebody has bipolar disorder, they typically have depression. If they typically have depression, they typically have anxiety. If they typically have anxiety, they typically have low self-esteem. In psychology, that's called comorbidity, meaning that all these things are connected, or typically one diagnosis or disorder exaggerates other disorders, right? Somebody that has low self-esteem is typically quiet. Somebody that's typically quiet gets looked over a lot. Somebody that gets looked over a lot typically isn't picked first. Someone that isn't picked first is typically not put up for promotion first. They bridge back and forth. It's not one isolated event. So a lot of times gifts will also do the same thing. Smelling and tasting typically go hand in hand. Great example. If you went by McDonald's and you started smelling, what you're actually smelling is grease, but let's just say we're smelling food, your senses will actually start to attribute, and you'll say, oh my gosh, I can taste those fries. And then what happens is, because you started smelling, your sense of taste started kicking in, and now you're thinking about the last time you had fries and it tastes so good, and now those senses start kicking into your other internal senses, and now your stomach starts doing these weird things, and now you're hungry. And then it goes into your mind, and then your mind starts saying, yes, we're hungry, let's make choices to feed ourselves. Once you feed yourself, the sensing stops, the taste stops, your stomach stops growling, all the senses go dormant again. So yes, they can come in waves, to answer your question. They can come for periods of time with things that you need. Sometimes if you get around giftings that other people have that are really strong, if you're empathic, or if you actually have that gift but it's dormant, it will do what I call activate the gift in you as a way of helping you to know what your actual gift is. So for instance, people that have a prophetic gift that don't operate in a prophetic gift, when they get around me, it always activates because I'm a prophet. If somebody is a real psychic and they get around me, their psychic ability gets heightened. Or what happens is, as I am, this happens in our live streams a lot, especially with people that are psychic. As somebody asks a question, as I get a picture, somebody will say, I got the same thing. Their gift is kicking in. Or they'll say, oh yeah, I got that and I got this. And they're getting a different vantage point of the gift. Or if I'm with the medium, same thing will happen with the medium. Their gift may, I'll give you a good example. If my gift is very visual, and I am a very visual person, I may say, hey, I see your grandmother and she has gray speckled hair and it's a bob. And she's wearing this like really interesting red shawl with holes in it. Somebody that's also a medium, but maybe their gift is not visual, it's auditory. They may start saying, oh, and your grandmother keeps singing. I hear her singing and humming a lot. I may not get that, but they might get it even though we're both mediums. It can switch back and forth, but here's the thing. When the communication is done, the gift is no longer needed. Mm-hmm. So it stops. So it can happen and come in ways depending on where you are, depending on what you're doing. Yeah, it's a lot of variables there. So, yeah.
Yeah. Funny story. So I booked a reading with Calvin, and I want to say maybe that like same day or not that long after, I was just randomly on Facebook talking to a friend, and all of a sudden I was like, I think your grandma's here. Yep. and then I just started like getting all these messages for her from her grandma. So yeah, that's another benefit too of connecting with other people who are spiritual and who are powerful is, yeah, absolutely. It will help to activate certain things. And it will just show up as it needs to, because I don't see everybody's like passed on loved ones every single day. That's right. Not, my main thing. But yeah, when it needs to show up, it will. Right. Especially if you're around a lot of people who are also like, have different kinds of gifts and all of that. Because I was like, I don't know what's going on, but your grandma's here. And
right. Now, I'll say this to the Kyrie, and then we'll get to the next question if anyone has a question. Also understand this. Sometimes it's not that your gift is, I'm going to throw a monkey wrench into this statement. Sometimes it's not an issue of that's your gift. Sometimes it's an indication of your gift being damaged or the sense being damaged. I'll give you a good example. And this is just biologically true. If you lost your eyesight, your hearing would get stronger. Your sense of touch would get stronger. It's just biologically proven. There's science to back it up. So although my hearing got stronger, my hearing is only stronger because my eyesight is no longer at the same strength that it needs to be. Mm-hmm. And I have seen this oftentimes when I'm working with people. Your gifting may not be hearing. Your gift actually may be sight, but if you're in a stage of your life right now where you're having issues of faith and you're looking around in your life and spirit is telling you to make moves, but you keep saying, but I can't do this because of this. I can't do this because of this. You're operating by sight, which means your sight is now diminished. Your sight is now dormant. I'm not reading you, Janelle, I promise you.
I feel personally, I feel like this is for me.
So what will happen is if you're, in a sense, we used to say in the church where you're walking by sight, not by faith, your gifting actually is probably sight, but because you're not operating in that, spirit has to go in a bypass mode and start working through your hearing, so you may start hearing things. The first time that you shift back into your real primary gifting, which is sight, your hearing will subside and your sight will get stronger again. So sometimes the wave can be an indication of instability, lack of training, lack of consistency, lack of knowing with your gift. It could be a stress that's happening with your gift, which is why I say every practitioner needs to go through self-development, period. Because how you show up personally is how you will practice. every particular time. You can't help, but you guys are getting a masterclass like nobody's business on this live stream. We need to give donations. Anyway.
So did you want to move on to the next question? I think
Sure.
Lupita's next. Can we connect with our own loved ones? Can this be learned?
I typically, okay, let me give the general answer. Yes, and yes, and maybe on that question. Very. So let me answer the first question. Can we connect with our loved ones? Yes. Here's the thing with this, and this is the funny thing. We're always connected with everyone, telepathically, in memory, in consciousness. So, not to be woo-woo about it and super spiritual, but we're always connected with people. Which is why you can, here's how you know when you're connected. You can have a memory of someone that passed on, someone you used to date, an experience you had when you were 10 years old, and the emotions will show back up as if you were still experiencing it, which means literally there is no difference in time, space, reality from when it happened when you were 10 to when it happened when you were 50. That spectrum does not exist. So I have to say, in all honesty, we're always connected. Now, second part, can this be learned? Yes, if you have that gifting already present with you. The challenge is, can you read for yourself? I don't ever advise that, because the challenge is the mind is a very complex organism that it will assert meaning where it needs to assert meaning as a way of protecting itself. Like I talk about this in my course coming up, so I'm not going to go into much depth with this. But what happens with a lot of people is if your brain starts to assume that you're going down a path psychologically that may be damaging, hurtful, that may be traumatic for you, it will introduce that conversation to bring a level of relief. It's no different than when people go into an accident happens, like a car accident, and they pass out. It is the mind, the body's way of protecting itself from any future harm, right? So you don't see the oncoming car, you immediately black out. So what happens with people, if there's too strong of a connection there with your loved one, which 9 times out of 10 it is, your mind will make something up. It really will, which is why you should have somebody as an indicator, because I don't know your family. I don't know them. I'm also not emotionally connected. Because here's the funny thing. Sometimes you might have a loved one that comes through and says, I'm having trouble forgiving you for what you did when you were 12 years old. And I was 10 years old and you destroyed my bear. Do you remember you destroyed my bear that mommy had just bought us? Even in the afterlife, they're still thinking about it. But in your mind, you may be thinking, oh my God, I just missed them. I just want to talk to them. And they may actually be looking for an apology with you. A medium will be able to pull that through versus you may not be processing that. So I typically don't advise doing that because it's a very, very fine line between that which is psychic and that which is psychosis. And the lines blur very, very easily. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. Like trying to bring in someone I love. And then it's like you want it to happen so bad that sometimes like your brain really will make up things and you'll think it's real. And then that's psychosis. You're like going off the deep end a little bit. Right. So I feel like I know why Lupita's asking that question.
I know why Lupita's asking it too.
Yeah. Well, Lupita definitely ask like a third party. Go to a meeting. For sure.
I think it's a good question because I'm looking at Ariel's question that she had.
What was her question? Oh,
she said, so you can remain connected to loved ones in death. Yes, it can. I try to normalize the experience of death as much as I can. And so I think of death like a long distance relationship. Best way. And again, as a medium, and if Stephanie's on, she probably can attest to this too. We sometimes have a really different role when it comes to death, that because people are always talking, and I actually physically see people and hear people as well. So it's not all sensory driven. It's not all impression with me. Sometimes it's literally like, okay, no, they're right here. And it could just be funny and weird and awkward. And so back to Ariel's question. Oh, it's right here. Sorry. So you can remain connected to loved ones in death. Yeah, think of it like your mom or your guardian, mom, dad, whoever. If they lived away, if they called you and you were talking to them and they said, "What's wrong with you?" after a few sentences, typically your parents know. You may not have said anything to them, but they know you. They know your intonation. They know your tone. They know how you talk, your pacing, the whole 9 yards. They know your patterns. They know that you don't call me every week. So what's wrong? And so as a consequence, they've learned you. No different than death. It's really not. The tie still remains the same. So that works both ways. If they're still present in this particular earth realm or this dimension, you can still feel them. You can still sense them on a lot of different levels. Sometimes if you grieve people too much, the grieving process actually causes them or hinders them from moving on and moving past and moving forward. Because what happens is, it's almost like in psychology, it's called sympathetic grieving. Sympathetic grieving is like, how do I explain it? Okay, I'll give you a good example. It's like a therapist in a session with a client. And let's say the therapist lost their mom a month ago, but their client just lost their mom a week ago. The client is crying about their mom. The therapist has a really interesting role that they're playing now, because they just went through it personally, but they have to honor their role professionally. If the therapist starts crying in the middle of the session, what happens or what occurs is what we call sympathetic grieving, which is, I am now being reintroduced to my own personal trauma because you're talking about your mom and I miss my mom. So now I'm crying with you. And now what will happen is the roles will shift. The client will then become the therapist and the counselor to the therapist, because the client feels that they have to. Very much like people say, I have to now be the parent to my parent because my parent won't man up, won't woman up and actually be the parent. So somebody's got to be the adult here. Sympathetic grieving. So sometimes loved ones can't pass on or won't pass on by their own choice because they feel they have to still be with us because we're now grieving them too much. And they go into counseling mode versus the continuation of their consciousness. So I'm always very mindful of, sometimes people don't need mediumship reading, they need counseling. And this is why I say, with self-development and training in this industry, you need to be able to know, I'm not doing a reading for you. You need counseling. And if I'm a counselor, I can give that to you, but I'm not doing a reading for you. And it's a hard thing, but sometimes that's actually the best thing for you, and a lot of times for your loved one, in order to pass on and beyond. Hopefully that makes sense.
You brought up a question that I totally forgot to ask because you had me over here rocking and all of that. But sometimes that really is it. I literally have that written down. When do you need a psychic? When do you need a psychic, and when do you need a therapist? Because there really are. I mean, sometimes we don't. It's not a psychic we need. Sometimes we really need to go to therapy. Like, there are certain things that I go to therapy for. There are certain things that I go to a medium for. Certain things I go to a psychic for, and knowing the difference between those things is key. What are some ways that people can differentiate when they need each person? Is it just self-awareness?
Honestly, this is a really easy question for me. When the clarity causes another cycle, people need a counselor. When the clarity interrupts the cycle, then that was the purpose of the psychic, the medium, or the prophet. That's always my distinction. Again, I tend to come from more of a prophetic level because a lot of what I end up doing is helping people to break cycles in the conversation. So as a consequence, prophetically, I don't do a lot of prophetic readings, and you'll know it when I hit the prophetic side of things. It's clear. It literally shifts you. It literally is like, I've just been born again. I don't even recognize myself. It's a completely different shift. I also know when I'm doing a psychic reading, which is more about heart and soul. And it tends to be things that people have already mulled over. They've been considering, they've been thinking. It's been things they've had a hard time letting go of. So if the clarity comes, but you're still in the cycle, you either need a prophet or you need a professional to help work through it. But you need someone to either break through the cycle with you, or for you, or you need someone to help you to understand how you're showing up in the cycle, which is what counseling does. Mediumship is great for closure and also for clarity. But I'm always very careful with that, because it's not always an issue of closure. Sometimes it's just a matter of communication. And I do have clients that on almost a regular basis, not every month, but sometimes every other month, they're in a good spot. The loved one is in a good spot. They're in a healthy place, and there's communication back and forth. And sometimes it's been like your spouse came through and they're saying that you're having a hard time finding the money or this and that and the other. Look in the drawer. Look in his hiding spot. Sometimes it's funny stuff like that. And sometimes it's a matter of, if their death happened really quickly, the closure may be needed on both ends. It may be on the person that passed on, and they need to communicate something to somebody to say, hey, I did not take my life. The life was taken from me. You need to know that, because I don't want you grieving thinking I committed suicide. I was murdered. Unfortunately, that sometimes happens. And then on the flip side, here's the interesting thing. I want to say this very carefully. If someone needs counseling and they're going to a medium, sometimes they don't get the consolation with it, because there is no substitute for your loved one being physically present with you.
Yeah.
There is none. And so you do know after a while, if it keeps coming up, but the person is still not finding closure, or I say a release from it, then it becomes more of a psychological issue, a mental reframing that somebody needs to work through with helping to actually, I'm not going to say it's not a forgetting about the loved one. It's more about helping them to come to a place like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She wrote a book. She's was a psychiatrist. She's not living anymore in physical form. She wrote a book called On Death and Dying. And one of the principles she said when people go through grief and loss is that it's like 5 stages, sometimes more, that we get through. And one of the places we get to is either acceptance and or understanding. I never ask people to accept their loved one passed on. I think that's a hard ask for anybody. I do ask to get to a place of understanding, which is, how does life look now that that person is not physically with you? We can understand that. It's a change of your patterns. It's a change that life continues. It's a change of certain things that you have to adjust in your life. It's a change that you maybe didn't do some things you wanted to do when they were physically here, except you didn't get to say what you needed to say. All of those are things that you need to come to an understanding about, which does not happen in one session.
Right.
Most times. So most people, readings are great. Most people need follow-up. So whether it's a life coach, a counselor, a therapist, whatever you want to call it, most people need to unpack it. Or you need to have a prophet, a psychic, or a medium that can work in that counseling role on call on a continual basis, like you would a therapist. I tend to say people that work in intuitive space, psychic, prophetic, etc., do it the best because I just do. I'm a little biased as far as that goes. But yeah, anyway, that's the long version of that answer. So
okay. Demetra wanted to know, how long should one fast? Should it be all of the fastings at once?
Ooh, that's good. How long should one fast? Should it be all at the fast? Oh,
so a bunch of different fasts at one time.
No, I typically say no. Don't fast all at once. How long should you fast? I typically, one, I don't know if Danny is still on here. Go to Danny Taylor for all nutritional advice. Not to me.
Oh my God. I'm actually working with Danny right now. Danny's my health coach.
Yeah, Danny's a health coach.
I have been losing weight, but I have been complaining to her every single day. Like every day. I'm like, I get on the scale and it's like it's the number is dropping, and I'm like, oh, I lost 2 pounds this week, but blah blah blah. And she's just like, okay, but you're getting the results, so whatever. So yeah, guys, Danny Taylor.
And so I say that very carefully because you can actually do a fast the wrong way, and sometimes fasting can cause delusion. It can cause you hearing things, seeing things, and if you're trying to attribute spiritual meaning to that, honey, your blood pressure just may be low. So I say very, very carefully, one, don't ever do let me say this. Don't do this without any consultation. That's one. Two, so go to somebody like Danny that can help you on the more health side of things. Two, never do all of those at once, because you need to be able to isolate what's working, how your body's adjusting at the same time. You will literally shock your body. And that's just difficult. The other side of this too, and I do this with spiritual gifts all the time, you need to be able to do one fasting, one practice at a time. I'm not a fan of a lot of different modalities at the same time, because you can't actually isolate what's working. You don't know whether it's meditation that's working, or fasting from social media that's working, or not eating carbs if that's working, or walking every day. It's too many things happening for you to be able to have a diagnosis and to really say how things can be fixed and changed. So I'm not a fan of that. Again, this is why I say this. Real power, real results, and I think Danny would also acknowledge this. Real results is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It is done systematically. It's done at a pace. It's done consistently. It's trial and error. It's a practice. It's going back to the drawing board. It's observation. Mostly it's patience. So I'm always very leery of people that just jump right out of the bird's nest saying, ta-da!
Yeah.
It's just always a problem. It's just always a problem. So yeah, don't do all that at once. It's not going to be helpful.
One thing at a time, and definitely consult Danny if you're going to be doing any kind of fasting. Lupita asks, should children connect with loved ones with a medium? Do you mean should kids be allowed to talk with a medium? Is that what you mean?
Should children connect loved ones? I'm trying to figure out
with loved ones with a medium. I'm assuming she means would it be okay to send a child to a medium to connect with someone who's passed on? Is what I'm thinking the question is.
Let me answer generically or universally. Yes, I think if this is what we're saying, I think we're on the same. Janelle and I are on the same page with this. Mm-hmm. I think it's okay for children to connect with a medium. Sometimes my challenge is that children, if they're not in a certain household where this conversation is being taught, they don't understand what's happening anyway. My little one misses his brother. Oh, okay, this makes sense. Yeah. So sometimes what happens is they don't know what's happening. Mm-hmm. So the medium is going to have to do education, and there's a level of empathy that's going to be attached to most mediums, because they're going to look at the child and say, oh my gosh, this child needs to hear something from his brother in this case. So a lot of mediums, unbeknownst to them, may make something up as a way of bringing comfort. I'll give you a great example. Perfect example. Almost every funeral in the United States, somebody always says, you know what? Your loved one is in a better place. One, you don't know that. You don't. Especially, it's funny, especially all the people that talk about hell, you don't know this. Two, why do people say terms like that? They're in a better place. They're not suffering anymore. They're in love and peace. The reason people say that is because they're reaching and trying to bring comfort. That's the first thing that people think about. What will bring comfort? I can tell you, I'm not doing mediumship right now. Disclaimer. I can tell you what most mediums would say in that situation. Your brother thinks about you a lot. He's very, very proud of you. That he watches over you when he's playing. When you're playing soccer, he's there at all of your games. That he's going to always be with you growing up. I can tell you exactly what's going to get said. That's not specifically mediumship. It's encouragement. Is there a place for that? Yes. I'm always very careful. I'll tell you, listen, it's not that though. And I don't have a problem saying that. It's just not. Now, and sometimes realize that mediums are also human. So if they go into that sympathetic filter, they will block out what the communication is coming anyway, all the way through. So I would, if they're an older child, different conversation. If the child has been trained to know what a medium is, different conversation. If their child is, now, here's what I would say is probably the best scenario. If the child is already in communication with the loved one, then get a medium. That's the best situation. Because then, like somebody like me or Stephanie, whoever, we're coming in as a mediator and helping them to understand what's already occurring. It's not a shock to their system.
Yeah.
That's what, and so I'm very mindful because here, think about how most children are taught about dead people. I'm not trying to be vulgar or mean. We are taught that people are ghosts and the boogeyman and things are spooky and all of this happens at night and nobody sees the person. There's too much mystery attached to that. So it actually can work against children because then they don't know when their brother is showing up. And so it actually can be almost more psychologically traumatic for the child.
It could be scary for them.
Than helpful. So I'm always very mindful of that. Again, I tend to flow more on the education side of things than anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because you don't want to also like scare them too, because if they can't wrap their mind around this whole thing yet, it's just going to be scary more than anything else. Like one of my kids, he communicates with his sister who has passed on, who he's never met. But it's so regular to him. Like, it's just, like we'll, like the other day we're watching TV and he's just like, oh, hey, Jolie, like just like super nonchalant. Like she came into him and he's just like, oh, hey. And like goes back to his, to playing on his iPad. You know what I mean? So probably for him, because he's already in communication, if I were to introduce like a medium or something, I don't think it would be a complete shock to his system. I probably wouldn't do that right now. I don't think I would wait till he's a little bit older, like just from my, in my personal experience. But yeah, I could see where it could just completely scare the crap out of a kid.
Yeah,
because they just don't know what's going on.
Completely agree. I think Dagda says kids are usually the best listeners. They absolutely are. Yeah. And here's the reality. I will always go back to the person that can bring the most comfort is going to be the parent or guardian anyway. You're going to be able to do that a lot better than what I would do unless you're unable to do that. And then somebody else is a third party. And most of that is encouragement and counseling. Most of it.
Yeah.
Is. So I'm always very mindful of that. Now, again, I tend to be a little more on evidence-based experiences. I'm just big on that. Like, I don't do generic stuff. Like, if you're going to be a psychic or a prophet or a medium, I want you to come with evidence. Don't come with generic stuff. Unless you're saying, I'm just here to encourage people. I'm not saying people aren't in their gifting, but it's like, a prophet going into a African-American church in the South saying, God is telling me right now that somebody here is suffering with high blood pressure. Honey, 80% of this church is suffering with high blood pressure. Everybody stand up. Row 1, 2, 6, 8, 10, and 12. Everybody stand up. Honey, that ain't prophetic. That's statistic. That's statistics, baby. The whole church is filled. Well, did you see that chicken that's in the fellowship hall? Everybody's got high blood pressure and hypertension.
Lord
that ain't prophetic. Anyway, let me not go on that route. So I'm always very careful at that.
I do feel like when death, I'm laughing about the chicken. I do feel like though, with death, having also lost a child, I always, and based on like other people who I've helped as well, I always suggest like counseling first. Especially like immediately after, and then because like you said, if you're grieving that loved one so heavily anyway, it's going to be really hard for you to communicate with them anyway. So going to a medium is not going to really, be as effective as you would like it to be because you're still in the shock of it and grieving so heavily. But yeah, I mean, kids are highly intuitive. They're closest to God. They're closest to all this stuff. So,
Right.
you know,
Right.
sometimes my kids say stuff and I'm just like, what? Okay.
Right. I love the statement right here from Brianna. Yeah, I love that. She says,
yeah,
I feel like babies and kids are closest to the other realm. Yeah, are closest to the other realm. I used to communicate with my uncle. Does something cause us to lose that capability? Absolutely. I believe that we all come into this realm receptive. And the problem is education makes us want to relate things to us individually. So what we end up doing is we end up sifting information for how it individually affects us personally. And I think that's the biggest, if I had to put it on any one thing, that's the biggest thing that kills our perception. Is trying to figure out how it applies to us individually. So everything else that does not apply to us immediately gets thrown out. So we say death doesn't apply to us because we're not dead and we're 5 and we have 85 years before this is even important to us. It's relative to us. It doesn't matter what's happening in Africa. We don't live in Africa. We're never going to go to Africa. It's relative to us. I'm never going to be a doctor. Who cares about the medical profession? It's relative. I think relative education is the biggest thing that kills the revelation that we are naturally, instinctively given and come out of the womb with. Yeah.
And I also feel like too, with like feeling like we lost the ability. Sometimes I just feel like it's just dormant because, you know, then when we do go to church and, you know, we're told that it's bad or like, you know, our parents are like, oh, you're not seeing anything, just go to bed. You know what I mean? So I feel like all those little things and then, you know, like what you added as well, just kind of like we just stop practicing and it just stays dormant. Kyrie says
I haven't had real quick. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I want to say this. I want everyone that's ever lost a loved one to hear me with ears of grace and understanding. Mm-hmm. Most people that lose a loved one, it's not the issue of losing the person that's the problem. It's the issue of two things. It's the issue of losing the pattern that has been or the potential that was going to be. Hear me what I'm saying. It's not always specifically the person. It's what has been in the pattern, what's been in the memory bank, what's been consistent, what has been the expectation built up. And then you look at the potential of what will not happen moving forward and your place in that experience. That person is simply the container for both of those experiences. So I tell people, like, it's good to unpack that because it's not always the person that you're grieving. You need somebody to help you unpack all of the patterns, the experiences, the birthdays, the fun times, the trips that you had to get a place of understanding. You need to also have somebody unpack the next birthday that comes along, the next Christmas that comes along, the next time you give birth, the next time you see somebody in the grocery store with their son, how you're going to experience not having the possibility of experiencing that now with your son or daughter or child or friend, aunt, uncle, grandmother that passed on. That's what's occurring. Most of the grief is not coming from the emotions, it's coming from the lack of the experience that you can't have anymore. So I say this with all love and care to say, you need somebody that can help you understand. You're not grieving emotionally. You're grieving experientially. Every time that you see that particular archetype that you don't have, that's where the grief actually is.
Yeah.
So think about that as you're getting readings. It's not just, and that's why I like to say that a particular reading, it's not going to be helpful with all of that because I can't be with you in Kroger or in Target or at church and on Mother's Day and everybody's celebrating being a mother, but you lost your child and it brings it up. You're not thinking of a reading at that time. You're thinking about the relationship and the experience at that time. You need somebody to help unpack it.
Yeah. Therapy's good. Like my daughter's birthday is coming up in a couple weeks. I already know I need to be in therapy every single week leading up. And I know for at least a month after her birthday, I need to be in therapy every single week.
Absolutely.
Because it's just, because again, a birthday, it's one of those experiences like, wow, like so I'm really not going to be able to have a birthday party for my little girl. Like, you know what I mean? It's
right.
It's a lot. So that's why, especially after you lose a loved one, you know, there are two other ladies on here who have lost children. I mean, the counseling is very important for those,
right?
You know, those big days, the birthdays, the holidays, stuff like that. And I also feel like not only are we grieving not having the experiences, but also grieving who we thought we were going to be. Well, I guess that is part of grieving the experience as well, right? So, like,
Absolutely.
For me, I have no idea what it's really like to be a mom to a little girl. Because I'm having to mother her in a whole different. She's in a completely different realm than I am.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's just like, and she was my first. So it was like after she passed away, it was just like, what do I do now? Like I was preparing
right.
a whole life. How I was going to change. I'm like, you know, I remember one of the things I did, I was like, oh, I got to pay. Yep. Danny, she's a Cancer, July 2nd. You know, I started paying down my debt because I'm like, you know, when she gets here, I want to make sure I'm financially secure. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And then it's like, all of a sudden she's gone. And I'm just like, okay, it's like you get deflated. Like, okay, what? I don't even know who I am right now because of my loved one passing away. So, I mean, yeah, therapy and just having the ongoing support is
right.
I mean, it really is key. One session will help, but there are just certain things that you need ongoing help for. Like, I've been going to therapy for years, like on and off. About there's something that I've been working through that I never got to the root of, because a lot of times when things happen to us as kids, we don't remember this stuff. We just kind of pack it away and move on with our lives. And years of therapy, I go to one session with Calvin, and he pinpoints the age I was when something happened to me and all the things that happened to me, and then showed me on a platter, here's how this experience at 8 years old has affected you in all these different ways, and here's how it's showing up in your life even today at 31 years old. That's a lot, but that's one session. So now I have to take that information and go to my therapist with it so that I can continue, work on it to unpack it and really grow from it. Because I also feel like another thing that people do, like, you go to the mediums, you go to the psychic, but you don't actually do anything with the information. You just get it and then you move on. You know what I mean? Like, which I don't know. I just feel like if I'm going to spend my coins, I need to go deeper. It's like, okay, you just told me I have this problem. Now I got to fix it, because then what was the point of me paying you if I'm just going to stay the same? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And I would say that's probably, even with me, that's probably where the difference with the prophetic and the psychic come, because a lot of times the psychic will say what the issue is, but not specifically where it came from, how we got here. And definitely it doesn't go into the counseling side of things. So what do we do now that we know this information?
Says, I'm not ready for Calvin yet. Listen. Calvin said at 8 years old, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, excuse me. Like, I haven't thought about this, but yeah.
Right, but because again, Calvin has funny, because the therapist,
psychic is not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so again, and I'm a coach, life coach, I'm a counselor. So there are times that I do the reading and then I am following up and working with people after the reading to help them unpack it. Or sometimes it's professional coaching. And it's like, well, it may be more of the business side of things, but there you are. Mm-hmm. It may be the business side of things that I'm working on, but we got some revelation in a reading that now it's showing up in their business as well. So to me, I love all of that. It's great, but not everybody can do that. So it does matter who you're going to. Janelle's
It matters who you go to. Let's see if there were any more questions. Well,
I know.
Lupita asked about miscarriages. Are those babies around too?
I'm so sorry. I did not even hear that question. Oh, there it is.
Oh, sure.
How about miscarriages? Are those babies around us too? You know, I believe so. Yeah, I believe they can be with us. Yes. I'm going to answer that as simple as I can. Yes. I'm always very mindful, though, that yeah.
Gonna keep it there.
Yeah.
All right.
Keep it there. Yes.
Wow, it is almost 11:30 at night on my end. So we've been on for.
Who's with us here? I'll tell you, they need a gold star.
Yes, it's been almost 2.5 hours on a Friday night. Guys are
2.5? I swear.
Yeah. So we're gonna as Toy would say, last call for alcohol. Do you have any last minute questions? Otherwise, we're gonna go ahead and get out of here and act like we have cool things to do on a Friday night.
I like we have anything to do.
Right. We're going to act like we have, cool things to do tonight on a Friday. So let us know if you have any more questions. If not,
she says I need my fan badge.
Michelle says watching the two of you together makes my heart beat faster. Is that like a cute thing, or like are we giving you like I feel like it's good, right? Like
are we giving her anxiety or like
I know. But I feel like she means it like she's excited.
I think so.
That's what I feel. Okay. Daddy needs her fan badge. Amy says it's been very informative. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Amy.
So I think that's it. Calvin, can you actually tell us about your course coming up, which actually ties into this subject really beautifully?
Oh yeah, that's good. Yeah, I have the second part to my spiritual gifts course coming up here. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get in trouble. Dates. July the 2nd, I think is when we're planning to launch it. And
it's Jolie's birthday. That's a lucky day. It's my daughter's birthday, July 2nd.
Get out. July the 2nd. It's a special day all around.
Yep.
I hope I got the date right. My team will be screaming at me later. Like, you got it wrong. But yeah, a spiritual gifts course. So those of you that are, well, if you're trying to figure out what your gifts are, I'm going to say go back and watch the first part, get the first part. I call that awareness. Mm-hmm. And that's really to give you information about what your gifts are. Like we mentioned the clairsentient. So yeah, so I go in a lot more in depth in that particular course. I want to say that is, I know it's like 7 modules. I think it's easily like 8 to 10 hours of content and workbooks and the whole 9 yards. This one right now, I am still recording content and I'm already at 10 hours. So it's locked and loaded with way too much content, quite honestly, for a course.
Well, what was the name of your first course again? Awareness, right? Okay, so awareness, I can speak to that because I took that course and that's actually how I met Calvin. So it's a great course. That's the first one. And then now he has activation. So you have some time to do the first course as well. And I'm not just saying that because he's my friend. Like I took it before I knew him. That's how I got to know him.
This is true.
This course. And I was like, who is this person? This walking encyclopedia. This is a lot. And now we're friends. So yeah, take awareness. And then like you said, July 2nd, Jolie's birthday, lucky day, is going to be activation, which will be the second part, which is going to be amazing. Obviously, I'm going to take it.
There's a workshop to go along with the course. So if you get the workshop, do not buy the course because I'm giving the course for free. Just a disclaimer on that. So it is a bonus. So you'll get the course anyway for free, but the workshop, so the course is actually designed. I go actually a lot of neuroscience about how the brain works, how it functions, how that plays into psychic abilities, spiritual giftings, all around. I talk about the sensing, so smells, taste, touch, how to heighten them. It's going to have some practices in there, some exercises in there. I deal with a lot of psychology, that self-development things that play into making your gifts better as well. The workshop is going to definitely be practice driven. So if you're an emerging practitioner and you're actually wanting to work on it, that's going to be the workshop for you. So again, whether you're practicing as a career or whether you just want to use it for your career that you already have, it's completely fine. Ashley, let me tell you, let me give Ashley a shout out right now. I posted that, I don't know, and I think within like 30 minutes, Ashley was already on it. Boom, got the workshop. It was so cool.
Ashley is very much into her self-development. So Ashley also took my manifestation course and journaling challenge last week. And so one of the things that Ashley has been doing this week, she's been manifesting really good parking spaces. Like I had everyone just start with like really small things. And like every day this week, because one, she paid attention to the information and she's doing the challenge every day. She's been manifesting things every single day. So Ashley, shout out to you. You are very serious about becoming your best self and everyone is noticing. So go Ashley. We love Ashley.
Yes. And I think it was Lapita that asked for the link. I just put the link into the thread. Okay. I think I did.
Yes.
I hope I did.
Yep.
I did.
You did. You got it. Yeah.
Thanks for asking, Janelle. So yeah, yes. And the workshop is going to be the next week later. And so, yeah.
Okay, so I think
workshop, I don't have a time on it, but true to form, everybody that knows me, we over deliver. So there you go.
Yeah. And then for those of you who'd like to work with me to have your natal chart reading, I'm going to go ahead and drop my link here in the comments as well. And that's the Mogul Magic Session for purpose-driven career women who are just looking for complete clarity on their life path, how they're meant to make money in this lifetime. A little bit, we talk about purpose, we talk about calling, we talk about your deepest wound so that you can uncover that and become your best self in your personal life, in your business, in your relationships. We go over everything based on the planetary activity at the very moment that you were born. So I would love to have you if you'd like to book a Mogul Magic Session. But Calvin, thank you so much for spending your Friday night with me and my community. I really appreciate it. This has been awesome. Thank you.
Always love it with you. Always. And everyone book a Mogul. First of all, let me just say this on live stream with everyone. I'm super mad that you came up with Mogul Magic Session before I did. Because let me tell you, bomb.com. I mean,
thank you.
I just love it. It's so Aries. I mean, it's just got Aries written all on it. It's like only an Aries would come up with that title. I'm telling you, it's so good. So, everyone that hasn't had any kind of work done with Janelle, you are so missing out. I'm telling you. Be prepared for clarity and change. I'm telling you, it's so good on every particular level. So, yeah. Janelle is our go-to person in the community for astrology and all things stars. So there you go. It's good.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Calvin. Thank you to everyone who hung out with us, all you cool people on a Friday night. We really appreciate it. I hope you shared this out. If you haven't already, you still can share it and everyone can catch the replay because the replay will be up. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting us. We hope that you learned a lot this evening. And we are just very excited about those of you who are stepping into your spiritual gifts. And if you need us to assist you in some kind of way along your journey, please let us know. Again, thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Let's see. I don't know if we're still on or not.
It says live on my end.